On the Record, where we bring you the voices that shape the fight for justice, equity, and democracy. I'm your host, Ebony McMorris, White House correspondent for American Urban Radio Networks. And today I am joined by, now I feel like a regular with AURN, Mr. Damon Hewitt. He is the president and executive director of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. And they are leading a groundbreaking lawsuit, Smith versus Trump, aimed at holding former President Donald Trump, well, let me just say President-elect Donald Trump, and groups like the Proud Boys accountable for their roles in the January 6th insurrection. We're going to talk about that, the impact of that, and a whole lot of other things that they are working on. But first, let me say, hey, happy 2025. How you doing, brother?
Happy 2025 to you. The year has changed, political scene has changed, but we still black, we still fighters, and we're still visionaries about what needs to happen in this country and for our community.
Absolutely. Just like you said, some of the characters have changed, but the game is still the same in many ways. The fight is still the same in many ways. I want to talk about the significance of this lawsuit. Tell our audience about it, what it is, and why you thought this was very necessary to do.
Well, this lawsuit emanates from one of the most disturbing days in modern history that harkens back to the kind of things that have happened in the past. A violent insurrection that led to the immediate and sometimes delayed deaths of a number of people. But really a subversion of the democratic process and the attempted silencing of our voices. Because the insurrection on January 6, 2021 was about the big lie of stolen votes. And the focus of the big lie was on places like Detroit, Atlanta, Milwaukee, Philadelphia. And what do they all have in common? They have large volumes of black and brown voters. The whole notion was that, well, if Trump didn't win, something must be wrong. They must have stolen our votes, stolen this election from us, which is, of course, the entirety of the lie. And as we saw, there are people who are willing to use any means necessary, including violence, organized, coordinated violence, to do it. What we allege in our lawsuit, Smith v. Trump, which was actually filed on behalf of Capitol police officers, most of whom are black men in terms of our clients, who stood on the front lines that day defending life, liberty, property, but democracy itself. We've alleged a regular CO conspiracy, a conspiracy to violate civil rights, in violation of one of the oldest federal civil rights laws in the country called the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871. And so that law prohibits conspiracies to violate civil rights, especially when you're interfering with official processes like the counting of votes in the democratic process.
What kinds of damages are you seeking in this, and connect that to even the broader mission for what you all have going forward? Because we have, even before President Joe Biden, but even more so with this administration, talked about framing democracy, what it means. Does it need to be reshaped, and how we articulate that?
Right. Let me respond to the second piece first. For us at the Lawyers Committee, we have a formula for what democracy means for our people. It means voice, so that we're meaningfully heard. It means opportunity, so we get a fair shot on a playing field that's certainly more level than happens today. But it also means power, a word we can't be afraid to talk about, and a concept we can't be afraid to really connect with. Voice, opportunity plus power equals what democracy means, the true promise of democracy. But in terms of this lawsuit, we feel that it was an effort to silence voices, to limit opportunity, and frankly, to snag and seize power inappropriately. And it was a failed coup attempt, essentially, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't send a message that they shouldn't have tried this in the first place. They must be held accountable. We're seeking damages that are very general and unspecified that can be developed further through discovery and that trial. But our real aim, Ebony, is to do two things. One is to discredit the ideology of the big lie, the ideology of white supremacist rhetoric, which fueled a lot of these folks as well, and the very notion that you can do this stuff and get away with it. But the second big thing we're trying to do is also destabilize. It's not only Trump who's a defendant, it's his 2020 campaign, which is still a legal entity technically on the hook here for liability. It's also the Proud Boys, a group that we've sued multiple times before already, and also the Oath Keepers, and of course a number of other individuals. So we want to discredit the ideology and destabilize the networks and infrastructure that coordinated and weaponized hate.
And Trump has publicly stated over and over that he plans to pardon January 6th defendants. What does this message send to you about accountability? How could this impact the future of political violence you see in this country?
Well, it's an invitation for future insurrection, number one. He told on January 6th, he told those folks, stand by, meaning essentially be ready to cause mayhem and wreak havoc. And so what we believe is this. If you think about accountability conceptually as a stool with three legs, there's your political process, which really ended with the end of the select committee when the House was taken over by different party leadership. And then, of course, there's the presidential election results, too, which some people say is the people have spoken in that way. There's the criminal liability leg of the stool. And the convictions that have happened have been overturned. And Trump also has now in pocket the Supreme Court ruling on presidential immunity, damn near blanket immunity. But the other third leg of that stool is the civil and civil rights accountability. And so where the political process may have failed us, where the criminal process may have failed us, Trump cannot escape, nor can any of the others escape, civil and civil rights liability if we can prove our case in court. We've been successful in getting past all of their motions to dismiss, at least most of them, to this point. So our case continues. Trump continues to claim presidential immunity of various sorts, and we're briefing that issue in the federal district court right now. So our case could be one of the very first applications of that Supreme Court precedent, which really was meant for the criminal context, but now could be come to play in the civil context. So this is one of the last chances at meaningful accountability, and I think it makes our case more important than it ever was.
You know, we're seeing the shaping of the future cabinet that Trump will bring in with him, with figures, with nominations like figures like Pam Bondi, who has a history of challenging voting rights protections, raises significant concerns with a lot of people. What do you see as the greatest threats to the legal system under this administration? And what are some other ways that you are looking at even countering that? Because don't forget, in 2 more years, we even still have another election.
We do. And then in about 5 years, we got another census too, right? We'll see who's in office then, right? So we do have to, like you say, keep our eyes on that prize on a go-forward basis. The threat has never been a person. There's some people who are so anti-Trump, they get riled up. And I think that's a mistake. I think the threat is the agenda and the people who advance and enable or apologize as apologists for that agenda. And that's going to be a lot of people, unfortunately, even in corporate America, as we've seen this week and in recent weeks and months. So what I do think what we're worried about most is something that is kind of an oddity. We're seeing the simultaneous weakening of federal agencies. There's a Supreme Court case that threw out a prior legal standard that had been decades old about deference to how federal agencies did make decisions and enforce and enact federal law. That's been thrown out through a lot of different legal attacks to the Biden administration agenda. At the same time, we're worried about the weaponization of those same agencies, right? For DOJ to exercise political vendettas and sue former Biden administration officials or even activists in communities to prosecute even. We're worried about weaponization. There's a bill pending right now that would give the Secretary of Commerce, or it was pending last Congress, I should say, to give the Secretary of Commerce carte blanche to label any nonprofit organization as terrorist supporting and then strip them of nonprofit status and tax exempt status even outside of the regular IRS process, right? So that is really Nixon-esque, right? That's what Richard Nixon did, weaponize the IRS to go after his actual enemies list, which is well documented. We're seeing a revival, sadly, of those same types of strategies, and they're really on the spectrum of authoritarianism. This is kind of how it starts. You convince people that the only way is your way, and then you take all the apparatus and hurt people who don't agree with you.
Absolutely. Before we end, just 2 quick questions. One on DEI. No, I know that the organization has been a champion of diversity, equity, and inclusion in an era where the DEI efforts are under attack. Even when it comes to, I don't know why we're talking about DEI when it comes to the wildfires in California, but they are determined to weaponize everything and come after anything that has a black face on it or anything that goes against what their standard is.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, look, I think that, I love that you said diversity, equity, and inclusion because it's important that we not just let people say, oh, I don't know about DEI. We have to
Yes.
force people to say, you're telling me you're against diversity, so you're for racial isolation.
Mm.
You're against equity, which means you favor inequity, right? You're against inclusion, which means you favor exclusion. Let people tell us to our face, force them to say it, not just what you're against, but what you're really for. That's what I
Yeah.
think we really have to be about the business of that. So whether it's Walmart or McDonald's or Lowe's, any of these corporations who have said they've dismantled DEI, Tractor Supply, tell us what your values really are. We can draw an inference. We're smart people, but force them to say it, and don't let them get away with small talk and euphemisms and politically expedient stuff.
Lastly, just a few days left till the Biden administration is out. President-elect Trump gets sworn in on January 20th. I want to know where you're going to be, and then also what is it that you want to see in these past few final days? What you want to see the Biden administration do? We've seen some pardoning already. We saw what they did when it came to medical debt and credit reports. But what is on your wish list?
Well, I'll call it a request, even a demand list that we have credited the Biden administration for its recent round of pardons, categorical pardons, but we call for more. And we have faith that there will be more, even with just about a week to go. We have really strong faith that that will happen because the demand is just too strong across our communities, our allied communities. I would say on January 20th, it also happens to be the observance of the birthday of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., it's important that we reclaim the day and do it appropriately, not by getting into physical or verbal spats with the people who are here to celebrate Trump's second inauguration, but really to reclaim the day and re-ground ourselves in purpose and commitment for what we have to do, not just for the next 4 years, but for the next 40 years.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Damon Hewitt. You are always welcomed at AURN, brother. I look forward to seeing you. I look forward to doing an interview in person with you.
Yes.
We got to sit down, so much to talk about, but honestly, I know it's a quick interview, but the roots that you all have run deep. The push that you all have is endless, day in and day out, and so your work does not go unnoticed. And your fight, we will absolutely shout it from the rooftops. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much. We'll see you on the other side.
Absolutely.